Good evening. Thank you for coming, everyone. My name is Linda Laris. I'm the Vice President of the Friends of the Milford Town Library. The Friends is a volunteer group, and our main function is to raise funds for programming for the library such as this, so we can have authors come and crafters, painters, all kinds of things. And we do it in collaboration with the library staff here, who are tremendous. And you can join the Friends of the Library for $15 for a year, and it enables you to come to the book sales, to come early. We have a book sale coming up actually on April 25th and 26th, so members get to come on Friday evening, and then it's open to the public at 6:30 to 9 on Friday evening, and then it's 9:30 to 3 on Saturday, the 26th. And I mean, the books, we have such an assortment, and they're $2 a book, 50 cents for children's books. It's really, and for young adults, it's really a bargain. We have tons of puzzles and games and all kinds of things, tapes and CDs that are offered at the book sale for very reasonable prices. So I encourage everyone to come. And then on April 9th, we have The Garden World of Jane Austen, an illustrated lecture with Jana Billrock-Walker. She's the principal of Enchanted Gardens. And then on Monday, we have April 14th, there's a program, Maximize Your Meal Preparation Workshop with Pauline Etsy. And she's a trainer and nutritionist, and she'll be doing a little bit of yoga and talking about healthy meals. And then on Saturday, May 10th at 2 o'clock, there's Charlotte Lucien, a Haitian American storyteller, will be presenting. And then on Monday, May 12th, there's a metal smithing with Heather Beck, and everyone would be able to make a copper bookmark. So that one is open to 16 people, and there'd be a nominal charge. Oh no, it says all materials are provided free. Usually we charge for that. So tonight we have the honor of having two local authors here who are from our hometown and have ties to our hometown, which is just tremendous. So one of them is Catherine Marenghi. She's a native Milfordian, and Len Abram has returned to our library to read from their new books. Catherine's latest book is a volume of poetry, Things We Take and Things We Let Go. And Len's latest novel is Killer Apps, the third in a crime trilogy featuring Boston detectives Schwartz and D. Natalie. His previous books include Empty Doorways, The Medallion, and Debris, a novel of love, war, and Lusitania. So Catherine is an award-winning author of historical novel Our Good Name and Glad Farm, a memoir, which President Jimmy Carter called inspiring, and it really was. When she gave that presentation here, the people were out the door, and we just had such a huge crowd. And it's a fabulous book that she wrote about, very heartwarming. It tells a life rooted in poverty on a former gladiola farm and the power of a house to change our destiny. Her historical novel, Our Good Name, is based on her Italian immigrant ancestors, which in Milford we have a lot of Italians and Irish who founded the town, and then we have Portuguese, and now we have lots of other people coming to join our community. Her three books of poetry are Breaking Bread and Unfurled Love Poems, and her latest collection was The Things We Take and Things We Let Go. This latest poetry collection is a meditation on the things we carry with us through life, both physical and emotional cargo, and the things we inevitably leave behind during times of transition and change. And as I look around at our audience, I think we're at that age, well, I guess all times of life we're changing, but especially at this time, right? We're getting older, people retiring and changing transitions in life onto new chapters. Maybe that's not what your book is about, I'll let you tell it. She moved from Massachusetts to Mexico and infused this text with joy, humor, inspiration, love, and longing. And among her writing awards, first place honors from the Academy of American Poets, University Poetry Prize Program, and a Pushcart Prize nomination. The acclaimed poets Richard Blanco and Jennifer Clement Each selected her poems as first place winners on separate poetry contests sponsored by Crossroads magazine. Her work has appeared in numerous international publications, and she served on the board of the San Miguel Poetry Cafe and also co-founded Poetry Mesa, an international poetry community. She divides her time between San Miguel in Mexico and Cape Cod. So 2 beautiful places. And then we have, as our second author, we have Len Abram. He is the author of 4 novels featuring Boston-based detectives Schwartz and DiNatale, including his latest Killer's App, Empty Doorways, and The Medallion, as well as the standalone Debris, a novel of love. And the Lusitania. His short story, A Cup of Kindness, was included in Adam Patch's collection, Final Fenway Fiction, more short stories from Red Sox Nation. Len has also published numerous articles in the Belmont Patch, including The Race is Canceled, Bombs, a first person's view of the Boston Marathon, and book reviews in the Jewish Advocate. He earned a PhD in American Literature and taught at 3 universities, including the University of Maryland, Armed Forces Program overseas, Korea, Thailand, Taiwan, Japan, and Bermuda. Later, he wrote technical documents for BBC Communications, the Federal Reserve in Boston, and Fidelity Investments. He also wrote articles for its Financial Services magazine and interviewed Susie Orman and Larry Kudlow. According to Len, why does he write? He said, William Faulkner said, the problems of the human heart in conflict with itself alone make good writing because only that is worth writing about, worth the agony and the sweat. His latest book is dedicated to his late sister, Helen, and looks like Hinder Wright of Milford, and he then currently lives in Belmont. So for those of us here are dedicated readers and enthusiasts, and we're going to have 2 tremendous people's authors speaking to us tonight. So first we'll hear from Catherine, and then Len will present after that.
Hi, can you hear me okay? Mm-hmm. Thank you, Linda. That was very nice. It's always a pleasure to come to this library. As Linda recalled, I presented my first book here to a very warm crowd, and this library has always been tremendously good to me, always welcoming me when I had a new book, and when I researched books. Anne Gerard and her team have been so helpful. I was researching my historic fiction in 2020, just as COVID started, and I couldn't travel here to do research in the library. But Anne was working, even though the library was closed. She would send me old newspaper articles that I needed from the Milford Daily News from the 1920s on Sacco and Vanzetti. I could ask her obscure questions like, would my grandparents have had a telephone in 1925? And she'd pull out an old telephone directory and say, nope, they're not listed. So Anne and this whole team here has been really wonderful, just as the Historical Commission, which I think of as the library. That was the library when I was growing up. Anne LaMontagne and her team have been really helpful whenever I've needed to do research. So librarians are great, and I think they should rule the world. So I'm going to read, as Linda was saying, I made a move to San Miguel de Allende in central Mexico in 2016. I had been going to a writers' conference there starting in 2014, a wonderful writers' conference. I knew nothing of this town, and I couldn't explain how happy I felt in this town. I felt young, I felt alive. The town is beautiful. It's an old Spanish colonial town. Flowers everywhere, gorgeous weather, perfect weather. But there was just something about this town. I kept coming back. And I went 2014, 15, and 16 in February, during the 3 worst winters, I think, in Massachusetts history. And then I'd come back to my house buried in snow, below 0 temperatures. I had left this warm, beautiful, sunny place, and finally I said, I should live there and not here. But I've always been very rooted here in many, many ways. There's so many friends in Milford, let alone other parts of Massachusetts. So something always brings me back. Even having a house in Mexico, I always am coming back. And my first poem is actually about that. It's called Leaving Massachusetts, something I've done many times. Before the maple trees, oh my. Is that because I'm leaning on the table? Am I doing something wrong? Before the maple leaves have a chance to set themselves on fire again, and summer has ticked off its annual checklist, daylilies, done, irises, done, hedge roses, lavender, blackberries, done. That's when I haul the suitcases down from the attic, check the date on my passport, and pull up weather reports to see what's falling from Mexican skies. The cat will miss you, my brother says, but I know what he means. We who have 7 decades behind us don't need to belabor goodbyes. He was always the rooted part of our family tree, and I the wind-borne seed. Leaving Massachusetts has been habit-forming. Its airport knows me well enough to leave the key under the doormat. I've grown weary of the weather's mood swings, from the scolding tongue of February to September's sycophantic praise. The backhanded slap of its summer sun has reddened my cheek more than once. I say I won't return, but something always turns me around. What is it about this bay state that stretches its scrawny arm into the wild Atlantic to beckon me homeward? Every peak and pillar here is saturated with something remembered. The first time I sang or walked or loved or grieved or bore a child, my first of everything was always here. Well, a lot of the poems in this book are meditations on all the little choices we make when we have to make a move. I think a lot of us are at a point in life when, we're starting to get rid of the things we acquired in the first half of our life. But when you make a big move, like a move to another country, you really have to make some hard choices. What do I take with me? Sometimes it's odd little things, and sometimes it's big things, and there are a lot of things we have to let go of. Here's a little thing I brought with me. It's an employee badge that belonged to my mother when she worked at Draper Corporation. It's called the Draper Badge. Employee badge number 3680, embossed tin, widely spaced letters encircle its green rim. Draper Corporation, once a maker of cotton looms, now a relic of the smoky past, fossilized like a woolly mammoth. The green circle frames my mother's face as it was, before the man, the children, the farm, ragged barefoot years, leaving her feet and hands chapped as elephant skin. Before all that, the girl who wore her future like a gaggle of pin curls, clutched her dreams as tight as the belt cinched at her tiny waist. Ever the good girl, doing her part for the war effort, when a maker of looms retooled, did an abrupt about-face to making howitzers. Did she handle the metal parts, the barrels, the casings, hone projectiles that would tear into enemy lines on the Guadalcanal? When the war ended, she married the man from the factory floor, the one who drove the electric jitney, gave her a look that scorched the line between her past and her future. She gave up everything for him, but this she kept, something he couldn't take from her. A circular photo badge that slipped between the gears of time, tumbled down her cedar chest, through sheaves of letters, souvenirs, and photos, rolled to the bottom, snagged in the sheer lingerie she wore on her wedding night, to find its home a lifetime later in a satin jewelry pouch in her daughter's Mexican home. The next poem is about another odd choice of something perhaps that I brought with me, a lunchbox. It's called the Charlie Brown Lunchbox. A birthday gift to a little boy in 1969. Impossibly heavy metal box, rounded corners, toggle latch, a few dings and grains of rust on its orange trim. Charlie Brown, Lucy Linus, Snoopy Schroeder, comic strips wrapped around the sides like stories circling a Grecian urn. Inside a matching thermos, missing its red plastic cap. This its most endearing feature, considering it was he who lost it. He who drank his chocolate milk from it. He who loved it. He who will always be 9 years old. This one is called Letters Tied with Kitchen String. Long after most of the world had telephones, my mother wrote letters, and in return she received them, kept them in bundles tied with kitchen string, stuffed into sticky bureau drawers or cedar chest where they yellowed and crumbled, waiting for me to find them. Some were birthday greeting cards, still holding crisp $2 bills, silver certificates. Others hid checks she never cashed. And the news they shared was never momentous. A neighbor's child was starting school, a recipe for gingerbread cake copied from Ladies' Home Journal, and always, how are the children? Is Jerry working yet? Are you getting by? A congregation of letters receiving the day's gospel, reciting it back, a polite call and response, unfolded notes and cards a century old, not one written by anybody still alive. Will anyone find them precious but me? Will anyone know who Aunt Ella is, or Cousin George? I will do today what somebody else will do when I'm gone. Stuff these letters into plastic bags, toss them from my second floor window and into the dumpster below. I'm sorry I can't take you with me, Ella and George, or you, dear mother. I'm sorry. This poem was about something that was even harder to make up my mind about. It's called My Books. Like loose hairs I brush from my head, nail clippings, fluids, and fingerprints, forensically identifiable as traces of my body. So are my books. I couldn't keep them all when I moved from there to here. Some I've read from cover to cover, others unread, but even so, they have comforted me, bearing their lovely vertical spines, a century of promises. Yellowed paperbacks mixed with cloth-bound hardcovers, many still in glossy dust jackets, a few in tooled leather, gilded lettering, raised cords on the spine only for show. The ones I favored, poetry books, the ones I will open again and again, will stay with me till my eulogy is sprinkled over my ashes. Others I took only because I penned them with my own hand. Some 20 crates of books traveled 2,600 miles with me. The rest were dispersed to far-flung library shelves, purveyors of used books, little free libraries. Stragglers awaited new owners in boxes left on my doorstep marked, "Free, please take." The children's books, the ones I read to my son, were the hardest to part with. But the ones that accompanied me will be like a sourdough starter. Wild yeast and ferment will burgeon and blossom, turning a single bookcase into another house full of books, shared like nourishing bread, passed from hand to outstretched hand. This one's a little lighter. It's called High-Heeled Shoes. It was madness to bring them to San Miguel, where cobblestone streets wage a bloody war against women in high-heeled shoes. They call it the City of Fallen Women, named for the tumble and pratfall of those who dare step out in high-heeled shoes. But mine were not just shoes. They were works of art, sculpted in snakeskin, patent leather, or suede, with flirty straps and buckles. They gave my leg a suggestive curve and 3 or 4 inches of elevation, making me statuesque in my high-heeled shoes. Surely I'd wear them again, if not in this Mexican town, perhaps on trips to the States, for parties, receptions, calling for dressy, high-heeled shoes. I imagined a TV talk show host beckoning me to the guest chair, where I would sit and seductively fold my leg, flashing my perfectly beautiful high-heeled shoe. But I've traveled time and again and carried only my practical footwear, flat sneakers, kitten heels, but never high-heeled shoes. I was warned of the dangers: musculoskeletal injuries, bunions, swollen feet, plantar fasciitis, arthritic pinch and pain from high-heeled shoes. Yet here they are, perched in neat rows on my closet shelves, as if caressing the feet of invisible women, waiting to walk down an aisle to a son's wedding, command an executive suite, or step out onto a dance floor. They stand in judgment of my vanity, receptacles of a younger woman's fantasies, these high-heeled shoes. I choke on the words younger woman. Perhaps it is down to this: I have to admit I am past the age for high-heeled shoes. This is called the Antique Singer Sewing Machine. Weighing more than a person, it would never make the cut for the menaje de casa, essential household goods specially chosen, labeled, and packed for shipment to Mexico. The Singer Model 127, made to last 100 years, with darkly varnished cabinet, original belts and bobbins, black wrought iron stand and pedal, hand wheels still spinning smoothly as if it were freshly oiled. No one then had ever conceived of planned obsolescence. Instead, they built this lovely machine with paisley flourishes laced with gold and feminine swirls, to be handed down from mother to daughter, back when they thought the world would never end. Nothing is made like this anymore. Here, I will hand it off to you. And please don't tell me you've painted it red or some god-awful color, turned it into a lamp, or left it out in your garden to weather, a whimsical artifact on which to arrange your flower pots. Let me imagine you instead as a diligent seamstress, working into the night, slanted eye, steady hand, your feet gently rocking the treadle, forming a perfectly straight seam. How am I doing for time? One more?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay, just one more. So some of these poems were about the decisions about what to bring, and others were about being here. Let's see. If you live in San Miguel, you're called a San Miguelense. I'll explain that in this poem. It's called Citizen. I want to be one of the San Miguelenses. No more turista, no voyeurista, no more stopping to photograph, barely pausing at Bougainvillea, turning away from the bosom of golden loaves at the panaderia, snubbing the frilled skirts of the calabaza blossoms, shunning the pursed lips of the pomegranates. Like a former lover you pass on the street pretending not to see, nothing will shake my forward gaze, not if I wish to blend in as one adobe brick among many. Only when a street vendor calls me güera, that means white girl, offers a fringed rebozo held like a matador's fiery cape, I snap back into my gringa skin, surrender my ever-widening eyes to the otomi women in pleated skirts, their necks ringed with straw beads for sale, the mother and son hawking whittled wooden burros, and Carlos balancing dozens of straw hats in a single stack on his head. That's when I dig deep in my pockets for pesos to buy a mariachi song. I'll leave it there. Thank you very much.
Well, that was lovely.
Thank you.
Yeah, lovely. I was thinking about Helen. I'm here. One of the reasons I'm here is, and thank you so much for the invitation, is that I'm honoring the memory of Helen Wright, who was my sister, who died about 4 years ago, who read, encouraged and read everything that I'd ever written. And so I'm here tonight in a way to honor her memory. The book is called Kill a Zap, but I was thinking also about how significant libraries have been to my sister and our family. I lived at 36 Spruce Street, that's where we grew up, right across from Memorial Hall, and that's where the library was once situated. And so that was the place you ran to. If you had 5 people living in a very small apartment with 1 bathroom, you ran to the library. And so, and I'm reminded that Andrew Carnegie, when he wanted to contribute to American life, he built libraries. That's what he did. So I also was thinking about my sister today, if I may become autobiographical here. Is a friend of mine is traveling to Alaska. He has a daughter living in Alaska. And he's going to travel there, and he said he's gathering all the clothing he's going to need. And I said, thermal underwear. And why do I say thermal underwear and my sister Helen? Because one of my jobs, and I've had a whole bunch of jobs, I moved from teaching and literature to high tech. And that'll be that's part of my novel, high tech and literature. But while I was working for the U.S. Armed Forces, I was stationed at a base in South Korea called Osan. And while I was there, winter was coming in, and there were these Siberian winds coming down, very famous, by the way, in the battle at Chosin Reservoir for the Marines, because they faced bitter cold. Many of them had frostbite when that battle was over. But so I went to the BX and I went to the economy looking for thermal underwear, and I couldn't find any. Everybody else was worried about the winter coming in and they were getting their thermals. I wrote my sister and I said, I wondered if you could get me some underwear in Milford. And sure enough, she took a pair of my brother-in-law's thermal underwear. He was a tall guy, so it didn't quite fit me, but it worked fine. And she mailed me that underwear. And I always, there's another reason to be thankful to Helen, that thermal. Anyway, so here's my novel, Kill a Zap, and it follows, by the way, 3 other novels. There's one called The Medallion, and there's another one called Debris. Debris is about the sinking of Lusitania in 1915. And every one of these has some sort of story associated with it. But I have to tell you, I do jog around a fresh pond, which is in Belmont, Massachusetts. And there's a field there that's named Lusitania Field. And I just thought, Lusitania? This is around 2014. I looked up Lusitania and I realized this is a famous ship that was torpedoed off the coast of Ireland. Great loss of life, helped bring America into the war on the British side because of the German submarine. And I thought, well, I'll do some research on it. And what I found out is there was a family in Boston associated with the Emmanuel Church on Newbury Street. And their daughter was married in that church and was moving to England to start their life together. Stuart was the name of her husband, and her name was Leslie. And the ship was torpedoed, and they both drowned. So 6 weeks after the wedding, her body was brought back to the States, and they had a funeral service. She's buried at Mount Auburn to this day. She's buried there. So I was thinking, boy, what a story, what a story. And I just started researching, and I wrote this novel. And then a few months after I wrote my first draft, and Helen had read it, I met somebody at Fresh Pond, who I guess at Fresh Pond they have these people who take care of the grounds. They were very well versed in the history of the area. And I just said, how do you like that? I said, the Lusitania, the name of that field, encouraged me to write a novel about Lusitania. And the woman said to me, oh, that has nothing to do with the ship. Lusitania is the name the Romans gave to Portugal. And there was about 75 or 80 years ago, there was a social club that played soccer there who were all Portuguese Americans, and they named it the Lusitania Field. So I always thought that, boy, life has more jokes on than I like to. So I have here a novel called Killer's App, and the novel that preceded it is called Empty Doorways. And when you write several books in a row, there's some antecedent, something that happened. And at the end of Empty Doorways, anyone who's read it here, it ends on the 9th floor of the Brigham, where Officer Alphonse, has been shot in the face, in the head. And he's struggling to keep his life, to survive. And Donna, who's also a part of this book, comes in at that last page and pleads for him to live. Does he remember what she asked him or encouraged him to live? I don't think so. But he may have heard her or felt her, which helped him survive, might have been. So at the beginning of this book, he's returning to the police force after 6 months of rehab. And so backing up a little bit, is there any historicity or any true people behind the novel? Most of the characters are fictional, absolutely fictional, but this one character, Alvin Alley, is based upon a Boston police officer whose name is, God, I'll remember it before the end of this, I hope. But in fact, I dedicated this book to him. Look at it. It's not quite here, but I will tell you that he was shot. God, I'm sorry I've forgotten his name, but I'll know it by tonight. He was an Iraq War veteran. He was a ranger, and he was in this group called a unit called the Urban Gang Unit. They went out, very dangerous part of their work was to go out and disarm these young men, mostly young men, who were out in the street looking for trouble. And they followed this car, the police chase, and he got out of the car. Moynihan, that's his name. Moynihan got out of the car to make an arrest, and this felon stepped out of the car and shot Moynihan in the face. Moynihan went down. The felon who had shot Moynihan was killed almost immediately by his colleagues, Moynihan's colleagues. And Moynihan, everyone thought Moynihan had died. And it was happening in 2015. So apparently the bullet had gone in under his right eye and was lodged behind his right ear. So it missed all the tissue that would have ended his life. And I found out later that Officer Marenghi, after he had recovered, and I actually think he was brought to the White House at one point. This was a big story in 2015. I think Bob Kraft had him come to one of the Patriots games and be introduced. So it was a big thing. But I heard that Officer Moynihan went back on the street. He recovered and he went back on the street. And my character recovers and he goes back on the street. So that's part of it. So if I may read, there are 23 characters here. All right, lots of episodes. The setting is Boston. And if you know Boston at all, there's the Common, which is the center of the city. It's been there since 1630, I think. At one point, British soldiers were bivouacked on the Common. At one point, Mary Oliver, who was told not to come back to preach her Protestantism to the locals in 1640 or so, was hanged there. And there's a statue of Mary at the State House, right there at the State House, a famous scene. So it's got a lot of history. I happened to be working in Boston 15, 18 years, and I went through the Common every day, and I observed people there. And one of the people I observed who's in this book is the cat lady. There was a street person at the Common who actually carried a cat with her. And I've never seen a cat on a leash, but she had the cat on a leash. And she was obviously a street person. By the way, I was very surprised as my character is also very clean. It's very hard to stay clean on the street. Very hard not to, if you don't have a place to wash up or a place to launder your clothing, dirt just collects. We know that. So she became part of my book. And then settings became part of my book. The Common is a big part of it. But also on the corner of Boylston and Charles, there is right across from the Common, is a statue of a very famous American writer, Edgar Allan Poe. Mm-hmm. And if you were to go there, you would see that bronze statue of Poe. He's making his way back into Boston. He's got this stick. He's got a kind of a gate on there. For some reason, he has a dog. I don't know why. But he also has the famous raven on his shoulder, because Poe's most famous poem is called The Raven. And it turns out another set of characters here, the homeless, big part of my book. There's a professor, they call him the professor. He's a former teacher at Harvard who has something bad in his past related to his drinking. And when we see him in the book, he's a full-fledged alcoholic. And he's made a kind of family, or a family has grown up around him, including the cat lady, who is his lady love, and several other characters. And they wait for him, they meet him, and he hands out these nips. I think they're still for sale, right? No. To encourage them to wait. And being a teacher, you can take the teacher out of the university, you can't take the teaching out of the teacher. He teaches them about Melville, about Shakespeare, about poetry. And so there's a set of characters, and they meet at the Poe statue. That's where they kind of hang out. So there are these things in the novel. Lastly, in terms of geography, I don't know how well you know South Station, but it's a big part of my book. I worked next to South Station for 15 years. I worked at the Federal Reserve building across from South Station, and then I worked at Fidelity right next to South Station. I was there a lot. And then when I wrote The Medallion, which is mostly about a taxi driver at South Station, I let the proprietors of South Station know that my book was about a lot about their building. And my first public reading was at South Station, in front of all those commuters who looked at their clock and watches and they ran off. So there's a lot there that I've tried to incorporate in the book. And so I thought I'd read just a couple of pages here and there. There are 23 characters, and I'm really challenged to give you a sense of all of them, who they are. But there's Schwartz and Denali, and Donna, who begged Denali to live. She's now pregnant. I can introduce her. And lastly, if I can mention him, of course I can, you're not going to drag me away from here yet. There's a character named Guzmar, who is he's the Steve Jobs prototype. You know that Steve Jobs made killer apps. Steve Jobs is the proponent of the cell phone. And the killer app is the thing that changes everyone's life. It makes, the blurb says, it makes legends and billionaires. And everybody who would want to be a mover and maker in technology wants to create the killer app. And our character, Gupta is his last name, wants to make a killer app. And what he wants to build, and I think he has Musk in front of him as his model. Musk has built this Tesla automobile, among other things. He wants, our character, Gupta, thinks he can build an automobile better than the Tesla, for a whole bunch of reasons. One of the reasons is that the Tesla and all these EVs have to have 700 pounds of battery to propel them, whereas 100 pounds of gasoline in your tank will bring you hundreds of miles. The 700 pounds needs to be recharged. We know there are inconsistencies or impracticalities of the EV, but it's very popular. He wants to build this thing. And he has someone threatening his life, so that's the second part of it. The first part of the murder stories is that the homeless are being preyed upon by some shooter. The second part is Gupta himself, the Steve Jobs prototype, is under threat for his life. So I'll just read a little bit about the homeless, then I'll read a little bit about the other characters. Follow him, chapter 1. Why would anyone pay attention to Richie Kurtz? Kurtz wasn't at all sure. He couldn't trust his brain. Drinking every day, a norm to maintain, a disappointment to avoid, changed you, he thought. A few years ago, he was drunk when he stepped over a rail. It looked close to the ground. The 5-foot drop broke his ankle. The cops brought him to the ER where he waited hours for a cast. He got pain pills. Some he took and some he sold. Kurtz wore that cast until it fell off black. It was a hard lesson. Don't trust your brain on booze. Who paid attention to him anyway, except when he lifted his cup, jingling the coins, a few bills on top to encourage more. Some folks had a job. Some folks went to a bank. Richie Kurtz went to the streets. He hadn't yet asked for straight out for dollars, but with the cost of everything, a fiver would be much better. But most people ignored him. A few dropped a buck or coin into a cup to hurry away, like he was sick and they'd catch it. Once he found a pull tab from a soft drink in the cup, a joker. It's been a long time, longer than he cared to remember, when someone dropped a 20 into his cup and said, "The Lord is looking out for you today." Once or twice a year, he would visit his former wife in Pittsfield. And that's what he's planning to at the end of this chapter. He's going to go to Pittsfield and see her. But there's been somebody he thinks following him. Not sure because his brain on liquor is not so sure about it. But he finally sits down to have his supper, probably in there. He's, by the way, has one of these shopping carts, they get from CVS or whatever it is. I mean, and everything they own. I have to say this about the homeless I saw in Boston so often. Everything they own And this is in this vehicle, this whatever, this push cart. He's got everything there. So he pushes the cart forward. Vibration shook his teeth and the bones of his hands. The rutted road, passion-pitted, made progress slow. The warehouses were ahead, a warren of buildings and loading docks and a place to sleep for the night. He stopped across from the building he was going to sleep in. He was hungry, but before he ate, he made sure he'd get in. And he goes over and they're inventive. People who live in the streets have to figure out a way to get food, get this, get that. And he has found a way to get into this building, which is unwired so that no one will know. It's an old warehouse, and he can stay out of the elements. But he sees some guy there. And he sees some guy there. He thinks he sees a stranger there. Despite the stranger who may not have been there, Kurtz felt a rush of optimism. He had plans. He was married once to a nice woman named Margaret. She lived in Pittsfield, an hour bus ride away. He called her from the payphone in the shelter, and after a long pause, she said yes. And he explains, by the way, what happened to their marriage. When Maggie and he were married, that was 12 years ago, drinking was only part of his life. One day he woke up to realize it was his life. She couldn't reform him, so she divorced him. No hard feelings. She cried in court. Kurtz was told this. He missed the hearing. He was drunk. After that, he hit bottom. Alcohol poisoning, the hospital called it. He was there for a week. They notified his brother, Tom, from Lowell, to come get him. He got Kurtz into treatment in Bridgewater. No liquor, no drugs, nothing but 3 squares and a bedtime at 9. The withdrawal from alcohol was like dying. Kurtz dreamed that his brain flew out of his skull to find a drink. His room was so white he thought he might go snowblind. That was part of the DTs, the delirium tremors. So he's finished, all right, he's getting ready for his meal. I'll probably end there. Pushed the cart up a hill, a small hill toward a willow tree. Wasn't there a guy punished by the gods, he thought, who pushed a rock up a hill, only to see the rock fall back to the bottom and start all over again? That felt like his life. Kurtz parked his cart next to a tree. Beside the tree, a small stream ran to a culvert, and there he's hidden in the culvert. And one of the reasons I noticed it when I worked in Boston, the empty bottles of Listerine on the street. Because Listerine, I don't know if you use it as mouthwash, is 20% alcohol. And if you can tolerate ingesting it, it will get you drunk. So you will see people who can't either reach or find regular liquor will do that. So he gets his liquor, and one meal at a time, I want to get to this, and he's sitting there, and he's thinking, he says, one meal at a time, Kurtz thought. He took a plastic milk case from his cart, a seat to keep his ass off the cold ground. He opened the food tray on his lap, plastic fork in hand. Making yourself comfortable, the guy asked. He was standing right there, maybe 6 feet away. He had a kind of radio voice, pleasant, made to put people at ease. Jesus, Kurtz thought, it was true. He was near that warehouse. Kurtz thought he'd seen him. How did he make it here so fast? Tall, thin as a blade, the man wore that hat, the Stetson. And the boots, it looked like they were stripped off an alligator while it was still alive. I did see him, Kurtz congratulated himself. The fellow's cowboy boots had shiny metal tips on the toes. Might as well be hospitable, he said. You got that nice hat, said Kurtz. The cowboys wear, right? And nice boots. Is that real silver? Only a pimp would wear tin, said the man. Yes, silver. The boots had them made special in Mexico. I saw the alligator brought in to be skinned. Cost a lot, one of a kind. The hat, the Stetson. There are times I shouldn't wear it. Gets too much attention. People remember what's unusual, the man said. You having supper? Yeah, trying to, Kurt said. Only had breakfast today. Oh, I'd offer you some. You do look familiar. Did I see you around this past week or so? Today around Bancroft Street? Me and my friend Buzz, we think we saw you. So you did see me. Thought so. Your friend, did he see me too? Yeah, who, Buzz? Yeah, I think so. That's a problem, the man said. You enjoy your supper. Not to worry about me. I'll eat later. The man with the hat said. Kurtz relaxed. The man sounded like from the Midwest. The guy was no robber or no kid looking to beat up a homeless guy. After, hey, mister, are you an angel or a devil? Kurtz giggled. He took another sip from the Starbucks cup with the Listerine. The cocktail or cocktail was starting to feel good. Like his empty cells were filling up. Just medicine, he thought. Try telling it to those sober again at AA. Would you deny someone medicine? No, he agreed with himself. You're funny, the man chuckled, like he didn't laugh much. Don't know much about angels or devils. Do you think they're real? Not real like you and me, Kurt said. Real in a different way. Yes, I do. I don't think so. It's just us. Nothing else. No angels, no devils. Just us. I bet you think people are punished for bad deeds. I guess so. I hope so. Hope's good, but not good enough. Lots of bad things happen, and people go on doing them. Like those Nazis. If my grandfather hadn't landed in Europe with 1 million other guys, those Nazis would have gone on killing. You sure you don't want some of this delicious food, Kurtz asked? I am hungry, so you'll excuse me. He flipped open the container and dug in. He sipped his cocktail. The entree was chicken something or other with a Frenchy sauce, he guessed, with asparagus along with mashed potatoes, cold but buttery. He unwrapped the roll with a napkin. His thumb went right through the crust, but inside it was fresh. He started to eat, and the fork, the plastic fork, broke off on the potatoes. Kurtz got up for another plastic fork. He sat and ate again. The food was so good, but he still didn't know what to make of his visitor. The man hadn't moved. He had something in his hands. He was holding his phone out with one hand and something else in the other. Are you going to take my picture? I would have shaved if I had known, Kurtz said, laughing. Maybe. You look fine just as is, the man said. On the other hand, the man was holding a bottle or can of something. Was that a bottle of wine? That would be so much better than mouthwash and flat Coke and not even the real Coke. What's that you got there? Something nice? Kurtz asked. Oh, this, the man said, raising the object. Just something, a thing I put together. Hard to explain. Can't reason everything you know. That's for sure, Kurtz said. Lots of things don't make sense, but we keep doing them. Like drinking, he added. The admission surprised him. His brother was right. It is an awful way to live. He'd call his brother tomorrow. Would he try rehab again? Right you are, the man said. Don't completely understand this myself. Just is. Kurtz saw 2 fires flare from the thing in the guy's hand, like a lighter on and off, and he heard 2 coughs. By then he was moving off the crate by a force greater than the one keeping on it. Drills punched through his coat and shirt into his chest and knocked him back. He was on the ground looking up through the bare willow branches. The sky was overcast, grime covering the stars. Kurtz called out for help, but nothing came out. How did a warehouse get up and land on his chest? The weight kept his screams in his mouth. He saw the man picking up things from the ground. Then the man stood over Kurtz, who hadn't breath or time enough to ask who he was and why had he killed him.
Great.